promised, I wanted to make a follow-up video about my time with the Fuji X100 Mark VI. If you guys didn't see my previous video, honestly, it's one of my favorite videos I've made in quite some time, so I definitely recommend go checking that out. Essentially, I had almost 5 days with the camera on a road trip in Oregon, and I was able to really put the camera through its paces in such a short amount of time. I shot over 1,000 photos with the camera in that amount of time. Obviously, not all of those were good. I picked some of my favorites and put those in that video, but I didn't give a lot of thoughts regarding my actual time with the camera and what I think of the actual upgrade over the X100V. Now, this is not a detailed review, obviously, because the camera has been out for a month, but I did want to give some thoughts. This isn't typically how I do things. I really like to buy a camera and actually test it over a lengthy amount of time. You've noticed my reviews on the GFX and the R5. The cameras I use almost daily, so I feel like I have a lot of experience with those. This is more going to be just kind of my first impressions with the camera, kind of what I thought, what I was excited to try out, and what kind of surprised me in the end. But yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. So as I mentioned, I had the camera for just about 4 days, and we kind of road tripped all around Oregon to the different quadrants of the state, up and down the coast, to the mountains, and also to the desert. Oregon's a very diverse state, and there's a lot happening in the landscape, so it was very fun to shoot all those different scenarios with the camera, and I definitely found myself gravitating towards this camera more than my GFX on this particular trip. Now, that could be that the camera's brand new and I was excited to test it out, but honestly, I had it around my neck most of the trip, and I think that says something to start things off. A camera of that size is just so lightweight and it doesn't really infringe on anything, so there's not a real excuse to not have it around your neck. I always had it around my neck pretty much every moment throughout the trip, and I do feel like I shot a lot more photos because of that. It was just kind of ready, standing by, waiting to take a photo whenever I wanted to. And the form factor and size of this system is really hard to beat because of how tiny it is. Feels great in the hands, and overall it's just not going to impede on your daily kind of life. You're going to be able to just swing it around your shoulder, around your neck, keep it in your pocket. It's a very small camera that packs a punch. Now, when it comes to the actual features of this camera, the ones that I really found myself enjoying, obviously the megapixel bump and the brand new sensor is quite a welcome upgrade over the previous X100V. This sensor is actually the exact same sensor that is in my X-T5, so it felt right at home. I felt like I was shooting with that camera a lot of the time, to be honest. The photos looked familiar. At the same time, it's really nice to have that added megapixel bump over the previous model. I find in general, I just like to crop my images quite a bit, so having that ability now on such a small camera, I found to be great. 40 megapixels seems to be plenty for pretty much everything I would be using this camera for. We live in a day and age now where every camera has an insane megapixel count, so it really comes down to how the camera actually reads light and how it processes images, and I found that to be great as well. Another welcomed upgrade is the image stabilization on this camera. It works incredibly well, especially when shooting video. I didn't shoot a ton of it, but the footage that I did, I shot in F-Log2, and I found the footage to be super stable and really kind of usable. I think especially for those of us who have a YouTube channel or just enjoy shooting any kind of video on the go, this camera makes it really easy to do that. You're able to shoot without having to worry about too much correcting it in post or just having your footage look shaky. The image stabilization for video was very helpful, and also on the photo side of things, you're able to really shoot a much slower shutter speed than you normally would. I found all that to be great and worked really well. It's pretty wild that you can shoot 6.2K on this camera. Obviously, it's not open gate like I'm filming on the X-H2S right now, but I wouldn't expect that obviously on such a small camera. The ability to shoot any sort of high quality video, especially in F-Log2, it looks great. The color that you can pull out of F-Log2 and the dynamic range, it's astonishing, honestly. It's a very flat profile, and it's very fun to mess around with when you're actually color grading your footage. As I mentioned in a previous video, I picked up this X-H2S just about a month ago, so I've been messing around a lot with F-Log2, and I felt right at home again using F-Log2 on the X100VI. Typically, my gripe with smaller mirrorless cameras is the EVF, and it's either not bright enough or it's hard to look through, and I didn't find any of this with the X100VI. The EVF was nice and bright. I was able to adjust it to how I liked it, and I was able to review and shoot photos in harsh light, no problem at all. That's typically when I use it the most, is when I'm out shooting and the sun is really bright. I can actually look through and review my images that I just shot, so I don't have to look at the back of the screen. I had no issues reviewing images in harsh light throughout the day. Something else that was great is the ability to charge with USB-C. Now, obviously, most cameras can do this nowadays, but I accidentally forgot the battery for most of this trip and the charger. So I had to figure out how to charge it, obviously, and luckily I had a USB-C cable for my MacBook lying around. I was able to plug that into the portable charger and charge the camera up every night. No issues whatsoever. The battery life is also great. It was able to last me throughout the day, and I found no issues with the battery draining too much or lagging behind. This is kind of a personal gripe, but one thing I wish that they implemented into this camera was a slightly bigger battery, just so that I can maybe fit the same battery that my X-T5 and my GFX use into the X100VI. that would make it a no-brainer pickup for me. Definitely a nitpick, but I do love that all 3 cameras I have right now have the exact same batteries. So I'm able to just buy a bunch of those and keep them charged no matter what. Again, they'd probably have to change the actual size of the camera for that, so it's not a huge deal. To be honest with you, there aren't very many things I hate about this camera or dislike. But one of them definitely is the build quality. I kind of feel like the camera itself is definitely like a cheap feeling camera for the most part, and that's okay. Obviously, you're buying a camera that's sub $2,000. I don't expect it to feel premium necessarily, but compared to something like a Q2 or a Q3 or any of the other Fuji cameras for that matter, it doesn't feel as kind of premium and rock solid as the other cameras do, which again, I think it plays into this sort of ecosystem that it's in. It's definitely the smallest, most portable camera that they offer, so you can't have it all when it comes to that. I myself definitely am not easy on my cameras, so again, I think for me that's something to consider. Is I'm out shooting constantly and having this around my neck, it could get beat up, but again, I don't know how that would actually work, so maybe it's fine. So again, I was able to shoot 1,400 images in 4 days with this camera, which again is not a ton of time, but it is quite a few images I was able to actually take in those 4 days. I was up at sunrise every morning shooting till sunset, and I was able to get a pretty nice variety in those 4 days, shooting landscape photography and just kind of documenting the day. Overall, the Fuji X100VI was really great to use. I'm very impressed. I think all the upgrades are perfect for, this iteration of the camera. Definitely needed from the previous model. But again, really any X100 camera is going to do just fine in your hands. I think if you want that brand new 40 megapixel sensor, or if you want image stabilization, obviously this is going to be a great upgrade for you. But again, all of the X100 cameras are pretty incredible at what they do. So any camera I think within this lineup is probably going to be pretty fantastic. To me, the X100VI feels right at home in Fuji's lineup of cameras. I myself have the X-T5, X-H2S, and the GFX 100S, and I could easily see this camera fitting into my personal workflow as a photographer. Right now I'm trying to figure out, honestly, if I want this camera over my X-T5. I really love the X-T5, and as you guys know, I've made tons of videos about that camera over the last year. It's really been one of my favorite cameras maybe ever that I've purchased, especially digital cameras. I've had a lot of fun messing around with that guy and bringing it on different trips and travels, and at the end of the day, that camera has really made me pick up a camera a lot more often than any other camera that I've bought. The X100VI also had a similar kind of feel and aura to it, so I'm definitely considering switching over to that over the X-T5, but we'll see if that actually happens. All in all, it's a really incredible camera. It's fun, it's lightweight, it's easy to use, shoots amazing video, has great image stabilization, and the new improved sensor really shines. I think if you already have one, or you're looking to pick one up, or you have one on pre-order, you're not going to be disappointed with this camera system. It's really impressive, to say the least. Now, when it came to actually editing these files, I found that it performed very similarly to my X-T5. Obviously, they had the same sensor, so I felt right at home editing these images. Lots of dynamic range, great contrast, and that added 40 megapixel bump over the previous model. You're able to crop and really kind of manipulate the images however you would like. Now, if you guys want to check out the actual images that I shot with this camera, I'll leave a link down below to my website. And speaking of which, I wanted to take a moment to chat about today's sponsor, which is Squarespace, for sponsoring today's episode. Simply put, Squarespace is just the easiest way to build any sort of creative website to display your work, have gallery pages, organize an e-commerce site, sell physical or digital products, and even book appointments. I've been using Squarespace pretty much my entire photography career, and I haven't found one thing that they aren't able to do on the back end and also make it really simple and easy to use for someone like myself who doesn't have any knowledge of coding or any sort of website building technique. You're able to easily drag and drop templates, organize images, and create about pages that really kind of make your website feel cohesive. As an artist, that's really all I'm looking for, is just an easy, simple way to display my images in a way that works for me. If you guys want to check out Squarespace for yourself, there'll be a link down in the description to receive 10% off your first website or domain purchase. Thank you so much as always to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Thanks to you guys for watching. We'll see you next week.